Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Social Sciences, SOSS. Certificate Program in Library and Information Science, CLIS. BLII 012 Document Processing and Organization. Block-1 Classification. Unit-1 Basics of Classification, 1.0 Learning Outcomes. After reading this unit, you will be able to define classification and know its various meanings. Understand the basic concepts of classification. Explain the need of classification. Describe how classification is done in libraries. Discuss the various library classification systems in brief, and discuss the limitations of classification. 1.1 Introduction. Classification is something that we all do intuitively in our daily life and see around us. Lots of examples that illustrate classification. We classify animals, plants, birds, languages, and many other entities into groups based on what is common in them. For example, in a grocery store, frozen foods and canned foods are found in separate areas. In a mall, electrical goods and cooking goods are kept in separate areas. We group like things together so that it is easier to find. This unit deals with library classification. It addresses the subject in greater detail from the library perspective, describing the fundamental approaches to library classification, its need and purpose in a library, various classification systems in use in libraries world over, and the steps to assigning classification numbers in a library, and the uses and limitations of library classification. 1.2 Classification Basics. Classification is simply the process of bringing in order in a chaos. Categorization is done for bringing in order, separating like things from the unlike ones. For categorization of items, some sort of characteristic is applied like age, gender, language, religion, educational qualification, etc. The sorted things are further collected in groups. For example, we see lot of chaos in the following example: Mercury, truck, lily, pea, Venus, taxi, apple, onion, marigold, potato, banana, rose, train, Mars, orange, earth, cabbage, grapes, ship, pear, lotus, Saturn, radish, papaya, metro, carrot, daisy, pansy, Neptune, aeroplane, cauliflower, mango, bus, Uranus, sunflower. This is because the items in the above example form a heterogeneous group. However, some order can be brought by sorting items according to characteristics common to the items. For instance, when we separate like things from the unlike ones, we get the items separated into following different groups: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Earth, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, truck, taxi, train, ship, aeroplane, bus, metro, lily, marigold, rose, lotus, daisy, pansy, sunflower, apple, banana, orange, grapes, pear, papaya, mango, pea, onion, potato, cabbage, radish, carrot, cauliflower. You may see that the order in the above example is the result of sorting things into likes and dislikes according to some characteristic of division, like planets, mode of transport, flowers, fruits, vegetables. Thus, classification is an attempt to bring order in chaos. This illustrates that classification helps to organize and simplify the world around us. Classification in a simple sense represents groups, for example, Indians, Japanese, Chinese, African, etc. A fruit seller sorts his fruits into categories, say, oranges, apples, grapes, and so on. Further, each group, say, of apples is further sorted into varieties: Kashmiri apples, similar apples, golden apples, green apples, etc. An astute vendor may further sort each species by quality and price. At every step of sorting, a new characteristic is applied. In this case, at the first level grouping, the characteristic applied is species. In the second level of sorting, two characteristics have been applied: place and color. For further categorization or sorting, quality and price characteristics are applied. Take another example: all the IGNOU students, both male and female, belonging to various religious and caste groups, coming from different states or regions, speaking different languages, and having different political ideologies, have one characteristic in common. It is that they all are IGNOU students. In classification, a class can be of any size, or it may even have just a single entity. All Indians make one class. Similarly, all Christians make another class, Roman Catholics make yet another class, Indian Roman Catholics make yet another class, or Keralite Roman Catholics may make yet another class. A family is a class. There seems to be no end to making classes and subclasses of people. And various other entities. Ordering, arranging items. After grouping of items comes the process of ordering. Suppose you have 6 members in your family. If you arrange their names alphabetically, that will be ordering. That means you have put them in a particular order. Ordering is very vital. We arrange all books, periodicals, etc. in a library in a particular order. Classification discovers relation between entities. All the members of a group are related to one another by some common characteristic. When we admit a member into a group, it is because he has something in common with the group. For example, a book on microchemistry is admitted into the broader group, chemistry. Here, the common factor is chemistry. Classification removes chaos and brings in order. Imagine what will happen if students of a school gather in a field for physical exercise without any order. There will be a total chaos. Finding a particular student will be extremely difficult. The moment they are asked to stand in lines according to their classes, immediately, there will be order, and it will be easy to locate any student. 1.2.1 Meaning and definition of classification. According to Oxford English Dictionary, classification is the action of classifying or arranging in classes, according to common characteristics or affinities, assignment to the proper class. The Longman Dictionary of the English Language defines classification as systematic arrangement in groups or categories according to established criteria. The New International Webster's Comprehensive Dictionary of the English Language describes classification as the act, process or result of classifying. 1.2.2 Hierarchy in classification. Typically in a classification, items are arranged in a hierarchical tree structure, like classification systems used in biology. A group is divided or a member is included into a group on the basis of some common characteristic. A characteristic is an attribute, quality or property of an entity which relates it with or separates it from a group. For example, a group of people may be divided into males and females. Here, gender is the common characteristic of division. We may divide all students of a university into undergraduate, postgraduate and MPhil, PhD students. Here in such a grouping, the level of education is the common characteristic of division. Books in a library are divided and then arranged on the basis of their subject content. Thus, a characteristic of division is the common subject. Successive application of useful and relevant characteristics produces deeper and finer tree-like classification. Genus-species relation. Logically, a class or a group of items sharing a common characteristic is technically called a genus. The common characteristic is the differentiating factor to produce species. We may state that genus, differentiating factor, equals species. For example, tables material equals glass tables, wooden tables, plastic tables, metallic tables, etc. Here material type is the common characteristic to divide a group of tables. In this case, table is genus, material is the differentiating factor, and glass table and wooden table, etc. are species of tables. Given below is an example of division by dichotomy, which means dividing into parts. In each case, division by dichotomy. Look at the screen. This method, however, is artificial, as every phenomenon is not dichotomous in the universe. There are many shades between white and black. The modern method of classification is to divide by genus-species or by whole-part relation. Let us apply genus-species relation to science by applying characteristics. We proceed from broader to narrower classes by applying some common characteristics. To get tree-like classification, quality and mode of application of these chosen characteristics are very important. 1.3 Knowledge classification. Classification and categorization of knowledge per se is knowledge classification. From time to time, philosophers, scientists, educationists and the likes have formally made attempts to categorize the entire human knowledge, to outline its boundaries and show the structure of knowledge. For example, Vedas, 1500 BC, divided knowledge into 4 categories in the order: dharma, arth, karma, and moksha. The great philosopher Aristotle divided the entire knowledge into various categories. Classification of knowledge is essential for its simplification, understanding, and progress. For example, a new idea or a discovered fact gets related and integrated with the existing knowledge. With the passage of time, this is also a process by which information is upgraded to knowledge. Therefore, it has aptly been said that all knowledge is classification. 1.4 Library classification. Why do we need classification in libraries? In knowledge classification, we deal with the organization of knowledge ideas and objects in a systematic way, whereas in library classification, we deal with physical documents with the purpose of arranging them in a helpful order on the shelves. The main purpose of library classification is to bring related items together. The goal of classification in libraries is primarily to arrange books on the shelves and making entries in catalog or index. Classification is the key to open access system. In computerized systems, it is used for coding of entries. The most useful and helpful way of arranging books in the libraries is by subject. Sayers defined library classification as the arrangement of books on shelves, or description of them, in the manner which is most useful to those who read. In library classification, a class number is assigned to each and every document by using a classification scheme. This class number represents the specific subject of that book in an artificial language. In this way, classification may be understood as a tool to translate the subject of the document from its natural language to artificial language. 1.4.1 Purpose of library classification. To organize books, documents on library shelves in a systematic order, bring books on the same topic in close proximity to each other according to a classification scheme. To provide a known location to documents in a library where they are shelved. To facilitate subject access to enable users to browse, identify, and locate what works or documents a library has on a certain subject. To quickly retrieve documents from among thousands of items in the collection. And to replace documents to their original physical positions after use. Library being a service-oriented organization, classification is a tool that is employed to increase the utility of library material. Proper physical arrangement of books in shelves saves the time of users as well as of the staff. Arrangement of books by call number provides an exhaustive view of the collection of a library on a particular subject. 1.4.2 Approaches to library classification. Melville Dewey, 1851–1931, designed decimal classification which divided knowledge by academic disciplines of study and used decimal notation to denote subjects. It provides almost infinite capacity for expansion and insertion of new subjects at proper places. Ever since then, libraries classify books predominantly on the basis of subject content in the book. Thus, library classification refers to knowledge classification as applied to books in libraries. In other words, library classification is applied knowledge classification. Therefore, documents in libraries are arranged by subject, though different types of collections may be arranged in different ways. For example, government documents, patents or standards may be arranged by their own official codes. Current periodicals are usually arranged alphabetically by titles. Maps, CDs, pamphlets, photographs indeed require different and separate arrangements. 1.4.3 Library classification schemes. The standard systems, or schemes, of library classification in use have been developed using following approaches to knowledge classification. Enumerative, assigning numbers to subject headings in alphabetical order. Enumerative systems are ready-made, long and systematic lists of subjects along with their class numbers. These are also known as mark and park systems. Hierarchical, dividing the subject hierarchically from most general to most specific. Faceted analytico-synthetic, dividing the subject into mutually exclusive facets and providing mechanism to assemble them according to the subject of the document. Nothing is ready-made in faceted system. One has to construct a class number according to the subject and characteristics of the document. There are many living standards library classification systems used all over the world. Dewey Decimal Classification, DDC, 1876. Universal Decimal Classification, UDC, 1895. Library of Congress Classification, LCC, 1902. Classification, CC, 1933. Bliss Bibliographic Classification, 1st ed., 1940 and 1953. The most common systems of classification used world over: Dewey Decimal Classification, Universal Decimal Classification, and Library of Congress Classification. These are essentially enumerative, though with some hierarchical and faceted elements, more so for DDC, especially at the broadest and most general level. Classification is the first true faceted system developed by S.R. Ranganathan. In India, DDC, UDC and the CC are the most used classification systems. 1.5 Steps to ASSIGINING classification. Numbers. Classification is merely the process of assigning a topical classification number to a book, document. Two things are very essential in classification, i.e., analysis and synthesis. A classifier first analyzes the subject into different facets and then synthesizes them. Subject analysis is an intellectual work and like diagnosing the real contents, and after that notation is assigned to that subject by using the classification scheme. A classifier is free to use any reference tools and sometimes consult any subject experts in the subject analysis process. A good book is there to help the classifiers in their work. W.S. Merrill. Code for Classifiers, Principles Governing the Consistent Placing of Books in a System of Classification. Chicago, Ala, 1969. Classification involves three major steps, which are: ascertain subject content of the book, assign classification number. Step 1. Ascertain the subject of the book. To do this, one must first decide what the book is about, intellectual or subject content. The book must be examined carefully for the purpose and to get all aspects of the topic covered in the document. Every beginner has a notion that the title of a book is the sole and reliable indicator of the subject treated in it. This is a myth. Many a times the title itself is misleading, as such it becomes risky to depend solely on the title to know the exact subject of the book. So along with title, the classifier must always look into subtitle, book jacket, and content page. If the classifier is still not able to determine the subject of the book from its cover page and content page, then he will need to take help from a reference source available in the library. Apart from these, he may consult catalog records of that library as well as of other libraries, also online catalogs. It is like taking help from the experienced colleagues. Follow following steps when ascertaining subject content of a book. Examine the book, document carefully for subject analysis. Identify the topic or topics treated in the book as well as all aspects of the topic. If there are more than one topic treated in the book, decide the main topic. The topic which best describes the subject of the book and which a user is most likely to search should be identified. Identify the main class of the topic treated in the book. This main class will guide the physical location of the book in the stack area. After subject analysis, the other thing which needs classifier's consideration is place, time and form of the document, and the other important aspect to examine is whether the book is meant for a specific category of users. Step 2. Ascertain the discipline of the book. After determining the subject, select the proper discipline, or field of study, of the book. You may take the help from the relative index or consult an expert in the subject. The guiding principle of the DDC is to class a work in the discipline for which it is intended, rather than the discipline from which the work derives. For example, a work on Internet for libraries should be classed in library science, not computer science, along with other works on Internet-based library services. Step 3. Assign classification number. For assigning a number to the subject identified in Step 1, you need a tool called classification scheme, also called classification system. A basic familiarity with the classification system in use in a library is vital to classify books, documents and assign them a class number. In section 1.4.3 of this unit, you learned that a number of schemes are available for number building. It is the duty and responsibility of the library administration to decide which one classification scheme to use for document classification in a library. While taking decision on this matter, it is important to take into consideration the following points. What is the size and subject of the collection? What is the nature of the collection? Who are users of the collection? Revision policy of the scheme to be selected. Number building according to Dewey Decimal Classification is discussed in detail in the Unit 2 of this course. DDC is an enumerative scheme of classification. In the enumerative scheme of classification, the starting point is to consult the index and before proceeding to the pinpointed location in the schedules. But remember not to rely solely on index alone. In DDC, you need not to worry much about simple subjects as they are taken directly from the schedule. DDC provides summaries of the schedules which will help you to understand and familiarize with the broad structure of the scheme. The DDC is also a hierarchical number system that organizes the whole universe of knowledge into main classes. In general, main class is the highest level of classification in the universe of knowledge. It is the broadest possible subject area of knowledge division. The main classes in DDC are shown in the table below. What body of knowledge will constitute a main class will, however, vary from one classification scheme to another. For example, in UDC, the main classes of universe of knowledge are physics, chemistry, agriculture, medicine, history, literature, biology, law, education, engineering, and many others. Dewey Decimal Classification Scheme 000 Generalities 500 Natural Sciences and Mathematics 100 Philosophy, Parapsychology, and Occultism, Psychology 600 Technology, Applied Sciences 200 Religion 700 Arts, Fine and Decorative Arts 300 Social Sciences 800 Literature, Belles Lettres, and Rhetoric 400 to 900 Geography, History, and Auxiliary Disciplines 1.5.1 Some Principles of Classification. Dealing with simple subjects, simple branches of knowledge, is easy, but the problem arises when dealing with compound and complex subjects, dealing with two or more branches of knowledge. In DDC, for these purposes, different types of notes and instructions are provided. Apart from this, the following are some of the general principles to be kept in mind while assigning classification numbers. Class an item dealing with a complex subject first according to the subject, then by the form in which the subject is represented, except in the general class and in literature, where form might be paramount. For example, periodicals of physics. In this case, physics is the subject and periodical is form. Class an item dealing with a compound subject where it will be most useful. For example, a book on application of computers in libraries is more useful to library science professionals, not computer science students. It should therefore be classed under library science. Similarly, a book entitled History of Mathematics deals with mathematics, not history. It should be classed under mathematics. Place an item dealing with a complex subject in a class that is coextensive the subject treated in the book. For example, History of Mughals can be classed under History, History of India, History of Mughals, or History of Mughals in India. The best option is to class this book under History of Mughals in India. When a book, document deals with 2 or 3 subjects, place it under the subject treated more predominantly in the book, or else under the subject treated first. When a book deals with more than 3 subjects, place it in the general class that combines all of them. For example, a book dealing with influence of Sanskrit literature on Hindi may be classed under Hindi literature as it being the predominant subject. In dealing with some of the difficult subjects, for examples biographies, place the item under the subject field of the person given in the biography unless you have developed a collection under the subject biographies. Similarly, another problem arises when dealing with persons who made significant contribution in different fields, born in one country and worked in another, life spanned in more than 1 century. In such cases, classifier will take decision, keeping in view the requirements of the users, but whatsoever decision will be taken, it will be followed every time for consistency and uniformity, which is also an important feature in classification. 1.6 Uses and limitations of library classification. Classification is a vital tool for access to books and collections, in particular for self-learning in an open access system. It supports all other library services too. In a library, classification acts like a skeleton in a human body on which all of the body organs and Functions REST. It maps library collection by subject, serves library management functions, and helps in knowledge creation. Without classified resources, a library is nothing but an unorganized dump of books. Libraries need classification for realizing full value of library resources. Some of the prominent uses of classifications are enumerated as follows. Classification is a tool for systematic arrangement of books in a collection. It brings books on the same subject together, arranges them in a systematic order, from general to specific topics, and makes it simpler for patrons to browse collections topic-wise at one place. Browsing is to look at library collections without any specific purpose, a sort of window shopping books and other reading material. Browsing is a scholarly habit of value and importance which at times leads to serendipity, accidental discovery of long-needed and valuable information. Classification facilitates browsing books by subject. Classification is a tool to trace books in library stacks and replace them back after use. It is also used for preparing shelf lists. It has been claimed that a library classification serves three functions, namely cognitive, to represent the structure of knowledge into subjects and their classes, and design the theory and ontologies. Many library classifications, e.g., Ranganathan's CC, BLIS BC and BSO have emphasized this function. Information retrieval, classification as the basis of all information retrieval systems and methods both in manual and electronic environments. And shelf arrangement. Many bibliographies, catalogs, etc. are organized in classified order for better use. UDC was created to arrange entries in a universal bibliography, invoking facet analysis approach to analyze users' queries in reference interviews. Provides a better insight into planning and rebuilding new approaches to library services. Classification is useful for arrangement of circulation records, building a balanced collection of documents in a library. It is better known as collection editing. 1.6.1 Uses of classification in electronic environment. Classification as a tool is also used to arrange and retrieve records in electronic databases. Online public access catalogs, OPACs, functions far better when class numbers are provided as access point. Many search engines like Yahoo, Google, AltaVista use conventional classification systems such as the DDC, UDC, LCC to organize information on the World Wide Web, www. Excelio, http. science.excelio.com, search engine uses faceted classification for returning precise information. In the web environment, Professor Lois May Chan identified at least 7 functions which require use of classification. These are location, browsing, hierarchical searching, retrieval, identification, subgrouping, partitioning, and profiling. Given these developments, classification is aptly called as mathematics of librarianship. While a book is said to be the foundation of a library, but classification is hailed as the foundation of librarianship. No wonder that in the electronic information era, we are witnessing the second golden age of classification. 1.6.2 Limitations of classification. None of the man-made classification systems is absolute. Classification systems are not permanent and they need to undergo revisions, changes from time to time. Man has devised several types of classifications serving various purposes, but none is either absolutely good or absolutely bad. Depending upon the purpose each serves, some are useful, while others fail to satisfy the needs of all the users in all types of libraries. A classification system may serve needs of majority of users in one type of library. It may not be so true in another specialized library. Another library with more specialized needs may need different arrangements for knowledge organization. Classification, especially the library classification, has many limitations and problems like as follows. It is subjective in approach. For example, two classifiers may differ widely in the classification of a given book, and a single classifier may class a given book differently at different times. No single classification system can comprehensively represent in totality all the subjects dealt with in a book, in particular in books which deal with more than one subject at a time. In library classification, it is only the subject treated predominantly in a book is represented in the class number. For example, in a textbook covering both algebra and geometry, either it is placed under algebra or under geometry, not both. The point to understand is that the other subject is not represented by the class number, and such a work may remain hidden from needy users. Books on a very broad topic such as family can be placed under several different main classes such as ethics, sociology, anthropology, social welfare, or medicine. This sort of classification ultimately leads to information scattering. Therefore, at times classification scatters more than what it reveals and collocates. The universe of subjects is ever expanding, hence classification schemes need regular updating. Any single classification system cannot satisfy all users always, as their individual needs are wide and varying. Classification systems are not developed based on surveys covering needs of all library users. Every entity has multiple dimensions. For instance, a man is a father and a son at the same time, an uncle and brother to someone. He is both a Hindu and a businessman. Where to classify him is always an issue. Nevertheless, neither is there any escape from such issues, nor is there any substitute to it in libraries. In libraries, we have to work with imperfect tools. Points to remember. The first act of classification is grouping, as it brings related concepts together. Classification makes searching more convenient to the users. Classification maps a library collection. It brings all material related to a subject at one place. Makes library organized and helps in easy information retrieval. Satisfies the subject approach of the users. Enumerative scheme tries to list all the possible classes. Analytico-synthetic scheme allows the classifier to build numbers for compound classes. It helps in the effective working of OPACs. 1.7 Summary. Knowledge classification is used to organize books, databases and other reading material, both in print and electronic form. Classification is a tool for making library useful to users, increasing the utility of library material, and providing an exhaustive view of the collections of a library by subject. Classification facilitates subject access. It helps identify what books a library has on a subject, where to stack them and how to locate them in a library. This unit has provided a brief introduction to basics of knowledge classification, concepts of library classification and of the hierarchical approach to classification. It introduced to you various library classification systems in use world over, in particular the Dewey Decimal Classification System. It described steps to assigning classification numbers to books and other items in a library. It also illustrated the uses of library classification both in print and electronic media. In computerized databases and network information searches, classification has found new uses. Classification has become the basis of all library services, and hence it may not be wrong to describe it as the foundation study of librarianship. Nevertheless, classification has its own limitations. Thank you.